Have you ever felt like you're wildly capable in one moment and then totally frozen or overwhelmed in the next? Maybe you can deep dive into your favorite topic for hours, but struggle to remember if you brushed your teeth this morning. If that sounds familiar, welcome. Hi, I'm Essie. I'm an autistic and ADHD therapist, and today I want to talk about something that defines so many neurodivergent experiences, but rarely gets explained clearly: spiky neurocognitive profiles. This term might sound a bit clinical, but it describes something deeply human and deeply familiar to many autistics and ADHDers. A spiky neurocognitive profile means your brain doesn't match this slightly wavy line of average abilities experienced by neurotypicals. It's more like a jagged graph with some areas of incredible strength and others that can feel like dramatic plunges. You might be phenomenal at seeing patterns, reading emotions, solving complex problems, or staying focused on something you love, but also completely overwhelmed by sensory input, emotionally flooded by a small rejection, or unable to start a task that feels too vague or boring. While these spikes and valleys may be perceived as signs of failure, they're actually part of how your brain is wired. And while they can sometimes be disabling, especially in environments that aren't built to support them, they also hold clues to your greatest strengths and most powerful forms of self-expression. In this video, we're going to explore what it really means to live with a spiky neurocognitive profile, how it shows up, where it helps, and where it hurts, and what to do when your spikes feel like superpowers and your valleys feel like roadblocks. One of the most misunderstood yet powerful strengths in neurodivergent profiles is empathy. You may have heard the stereotype, for example, that autistics lack empathy, but research and lived experience tell a very different story. Many autistics experience something I call hyperempathy. They feel others' emotions so intensely that it can become overwhelming. They might cry when they see someone else crying, or feel physically shaken after a sad news story. For example, as a therapist, I often find myself attuning to a client's emotions even when they're not outwardly expressed. A client might be speaking in a flat, measured tone with no visible signs of distress, yet suddenly I'm overcome with a wave of grief that isn't mine. I'll feel the urge to sob, my voice catches, tears come, while I remain fully present, engaged, and thinking clearly. It's as if I'm embodying their unspoken feelings, almost like a form of emotional transference. It's intense and sometimes overwhelming, and I have to work consciously to contain it, but it also allows me to connect deeply, to be with them in a way that words alone could never reach. ADHDers can experience something similar, especially when they relate to someone's pain. A friend's breakup, for instance, might hit them like a freight train because they understand on a fundamental level what that kind of rejection feels like. Their own history of rejection sensitivity can create a well of compassion. Then there's authenticity. Autistics and ADHDers tend to speak directly and value honesty over social performance. It's not that we don't understand social nuance. We often do, but we just don't see the point of pretending. As an ADHDer, I really need people to just get to the point. As an autistic, I frequently find small talk exhausting or confusing. And while that authenticity can sometimes clash with neurotypical expectations, it also builds incredibly grounded, transparent relationships. People often come to me for the truth, not because I try to be blunt or provocative, but because they know I'll be direct. I don't sugarcoat or dance around things. If I care about you, I'll tell you what I see, kindly but clearly. I've learned that this kind of honesty is something people really value, even if it's not what they're used to. It builds trust quickly. They don't have to guess what I mean or worry about hidden agendas. What I say is what I mean. It's not always easy, and I've had moments where my directness was misunderstood. But more often than not, people tell me it's refreshing, like they can finally exhale around someone who isn't trying to manage or manipulate the conversation. Being authentic and straightforward is a communication style, and it's part of how I build safety in relationships. Deliberative thinking is another spike, especially common in autistics. We process information slowly, at a greater depth, preferring to understand all the facts before making decisions. This leads to thoughtful, well-reasoned choices and strong personal ethics. We're the ones who research thoroughly before forming an opinion, and we also hesitate to act until we've considered all sides. And yes, sometimes this looks like indecision. I like to think of it more as integrity in action. For ADHDers, the spike might look different. Bursts of brilliance, creative problem solving, or lightning-fast ideation. We might burst out in moments of sudden inspiration. Our thoughts move fast, often too fast for conventional structures. But when channeled effectively, we produce innovative ideas that others might have never considered. These spikes are central to how neurodivergent people process, contribute, and connect. And when they're nurtured through affirming relationships, accessible environments, and self-understanding, they flourish. But none of us live only in the spikes. Next, we'll look at the valleys and why they matter just as much. First, hypersystematizing. Many autistics have an extraordinary ability to detect patterns within systems, routines, language, even social structures. We aren't just noticing details, but we're striving to understand how things work. My brain often feels like a filing cabinet. I'm constantly organizing and reorganizing information, conversations, patterns, interactions, until something clicks into place. It's not something I do consciously, it just happens. I'll replay a moment from earlier in the day and suddenly realize what someone really meant, or why I felt off in a situation. It's like I can't let things rest until they make sense. Sometimes, especially in moments of quiet, I catch myself mentally sorting through everything again, reviewing emotional data, analyzing tone shifts, trying to reconcile contradictions. Not because I'm anxious, necessarily, but because the process of internal reordering helps me feel settled, like I can finally close the drawer on a thought and move on. This is how I create calm in my own mind, a kind of structured clarity in a world that often feels loud and chaotic. This tendency can lead to deep expertise, whether it's decoding a programming language, designing intricate spreadsheets, analyzing movie tropes, or cataloging every type of gemstone. Us systematizers often become encyclopedic in our knowledge. All of us are following a thread of curiosity until it makes sense. It's both fun and regulating. It can calm our system, build confidence, and provide structure in an unpredictable world. But it can also turn rigid. When routines change, or when something breaks the logic of a system, it can trigger distress or even meltdown. Now, for ADHDers, the spike is often being multi-passionate. We don't hyper-systematize in the same way, but we do hyper-enthuse. We are the folks who go all in on a new hobby every month. 1 minute it's watercolor, next month it's nuclear physics, then it's collecting rare items, then it's bullet journaling. Every time I fall in love with a new interest, I think, this is it. This is the one. It feels electric, like I finally found the thing that makes everything make sense. I dive in headfirst, devouring every article, podcast, tutorial I can find. My brain lights up. I lose hours in the best way. It feels like I've come home, and then it fades. Which is not to say it wasn't meaningful to begin with, but that my brain has shifted. It's craving novelty, stimulation, or a new challenge. And just like that, I'm onto the next obsession, thinking, okay, now maybe this is the one. It's exhilarating and disorienting all at once. Sometimes it feels like building castles in the sand, beautiful but fleeting. And I've had to learn that this pattern isn't a flaw, but more about how I'm wired. Passionate, curious, always seeking. It doesn't mean I'm flaky. It means I'm multi-passionate, and I'm learning to honor that without judging it. That ability to deep dive into a new interest creates a remarkable breadth of knowledge, but it can also be misread. Teachers may label it as inconsistency, employers might see it as a lack of follow-through, and friends might think, you were obsessed with that last week. What happened? What happened is dopamine, or rather the lack of it. ADHD brains thrive on novelty and stimulation, and when that's missing, interest drops off. The passion was real, but the brain moved on, often before the person wanted it to. This is where many ADHDers get stuck in what I call the jack of all trades dilemma. We're good at so many things that choosing just one career or path feels impossible. And even when we do, we often feel restless, like we're meant for something more or something else. That tension can lead to guilt, burnout, or an ongoing sense of not living up to my potential. Hypersystematizing and multi-passionate traits are two sides of the same coin. A brain that wants to understand the world deeply, but in very different ways. Both require compassion, structure, and freedom to thrive. At the heart of many valleys experienced by neurodivergents with spiky neurocognitive profiles is executive dysfunction. If executive function is your brain's project manager, organizing, initiating, switching tasks, regulating emotion, then executive dysfunction is what happens when that manager is overwhelmed, disoriented, or just doesn't show up for work. You can be brilliant, capable, driven, and still stare at a dirty sink for hours, unable to start, or have a huge to-do list, but instead spend the day refreshing the same 3 apps and hating yourself for it. This is especially true for ADHDers. I like Ned Hallowell's comparison of the ADHD brain to driving a Ferrari with bicycle brakes. The engine is powerful, but the regulation system can't always keep up. This executive dysfunction can show up with difficulties starting tasks. It often feels impossible, even when motivation is high. There's also impulsivity, trouble regulating time, time blindness, and difficulty switching focus even when we want to. Sometimes we feel like we know the fire is coming, but we can't make ourselves move until we smell the smoke. We see the deadline on the calendar, we know the consequences, we even care about the outcome. But something in us just won't budge. We'll circle around the task, think about it constantly, feel the weight of it, but not actually start. And then, at the last possible moment, something kicks in. Adrenaline, panic, urgency, whatever it is, it finally gets us moving, and we pull it off. But it's never graceful, it's never calm, and we're left wondering, why couldn't I just do it earlier when I had the time? That gap between knowing and doing is where so much shame lives. Autistics can also experience executive dysfunction, but ours might lean more toward rigidity and overwhelm in transitions. We may hyperfocus on one thing, but find it paralyzing to move to the next step. Or we might freeze entirely when a routine is disrupted. And let's not forget emotional dysregulation, getting stuck in a shutdown or spiraling state. What makes these valleys especially painful is how invisible they often are. You might have an incredible memory for facts, or give an insightful presentation at work, and then forget to eat for 8 hours, or melt down over an unexpected phone call. It often feels like failure, and that's a brutal emotional load to carry. Even more so when your strengths mask your struggles. You might be labeled high functioning, which really just means you seem okay enough that I'm going to ignore your pain. That's not a compliment. More often than not, it's a dismissal. And when you experience executive dysfunction regularly without support, context, or compassion, it erodes self-worth. It can also lead to a state of constant crisis management where everything gets done last minute or not at all, feeding a shame cycle that reinforces itself. So now that we understand the peaks and valleys of spiky neurocognitive profiles, here's the crucial piece of the puzzle. Context changes everything. Spiky neurocognitive profiles don't show up in a vacuum. They show up and get shaped by the environments we live in. And when those environments are mismatched to our brains, that's when our strengths can't function and our challenges feel 10 times harder. This is where we shift from thinking, what's wrong with me, to what's missing around me. Imagine a hypersystematizing autistic with sensory differences working in a noisy, unpredictable, open-plan office. They're great at their job when they can focus, but the flickering fluorescent lights, the overlapping conversations, and the constant interruptions make it impossible to think. So they start making mistakes, get labeled distracted, and feel like they're failing. Or picture a multi-passionate ADHDer stuck in a rigid, rule-bound school system that punishes spontaneity. They can brainstorm 10 creative ideas in 5 minutes, but can't seem to write the essay that's due. Instead of seeing them as imaginative and fast thinking, they're told they're lazy, defiant, or need to apply themselves. In both cases, the problem isn't only the brain, it's the fit. This is the core of the social model of disability. It suggests that people aren't disabled by their bodies or brains alone, they're disabled by environments that refuse to accommodate them. And accommodations aren't special treatment, they're tools for equity. They're what allows a person's spikes to shine and their valleys to be supported. For example, for the overwhelmed office worker, noise-canceling headphones, flexible schedules, or working from home. For the ADHD student, permission to record lectures, to use fidget tools, or to be given assignments with creative options. None of these remove the neurodivergence-related challenges, they honor it. And when accommodations are missing or denied, people don't just struggle, they start to believe they are the problem. That's where internalized ableism takes root. It tells us we're lazy, selfish, too sensitive, too much. It pushes us to overfunction, to mask, to people please, until we burn out completely. Burnout often shows up when a spiky neurocognitive profile is forced to function in an inflexible world. It typically happens when you've been masking your needs, pushing through executive dysfunction, and pretending everything's fine until one day it's not. You wake up and feel like there's nothing left in the tank. Even basic tasks feel impossible. Joy disappears. And the heartbreaking part is that no one else notices, because many autistics and ADHDers have learned to hide their struggles so well. We're the high achievers, the fixers, the ones who seem fine. We keep showing up, smiling, meeting deadlines, until suddenly we can't. That disconnect, the gap between what others see and what we feel, is a breeding ground for internalized ableism. This is the voice inside us that says, you should be able to do this. Everyone else can. You're just being dramatic. It's the lie that says if we were stronger, more disciplined, more normal, we'd be fine. That voice is what happens when we've spent years in systems that reward compliance and punish difference, when we've been praised for performing well and scolded for asking for help, when our pain is invisible and our needs are inconvenient. With time, this internalized ableism becomes a kind of self-policing. We criticize ourselves before others can. We downplay our needs. We refuse to rest. And all of that effort, the masking, the people-pleasing, the overfunctioning, piles up until our system crashes. This is why so many neurodivergents hit burnout not just once, but repeatedly, because the world keeps pulling us back into that cycle of function first, feel later. And this is why so many neurodivergents hit burnout not just once, but repeatedly, because the world keeps pulling us back into that cycle of function first, feel later. But what if we flipped the script? What if we treated burnout not as failure, but as a message from our nervous system? What if internalized ableism wasn't a fixed identity, but a story we were taught and can unlearn? Recovery begins not with fixing ourselves, but with reframing ourselves. So we've named the spikes and valleys, we've unpacked burnout, we've exposed internalized ableism, and maybe by now something inside you is starting to soften, just a little. Let's look at what healing looks like when you live with a spiky neurocognitive profile. The first step is reframing. Your brain isn't inconsistent so much as specialized. Your needs aren't inconvenient, but valid. And your struggles aren't signs of failure, they're signals, information, data, telling you, hey, something's off here. This isn't working for me. I need support. Start asking different questions. Not, why can't I do this? But what makes this hard for me? What would this look like if it worked with my brain, not against it? That reframing makes space for strategy. Strategies that are tailored, gentle, and rooted in your real life, not in someone else's idea of success. Let's get specific. If you hyperfocus, build in breaks before you need them, set timers, use visual cues. If you're multi-passionate, stop asking, what's the one thing I should do forever, and start asking, what projects give me joy right now? Let go of the pressure to become linear. Let your career or hobbies evolve like seasons. If executive dysfunction is a daily visitor, externalize your memory. Use checklists, Automate routines. Create launch pads for things you always forget. Ask for body doubling or accountability. This is you building the scaffolding that your brain needs and deserves. If you feel crushed by burnout, start small. Nourish your nervous system. Reduce your commitments, even if it means disappointing someone else. Make rest non-negotiable, not just sleep, but true rest, sensory rest, emotional rest, screen-free, expectation-free, deep breath kind of rest. And if internalized ableism keeps showing up, talk back to it. Name it. Say, that's not my voice, that's someone else's expectations fronting as truth. Replace it with something kinder, even if it feels fake at first. You don't have to earn your worth. You don't have to function normally, to deserve care. And you don't have to flatten your profile to be lovable, successful, or whole. The world wasn't built with your brain in mind, but you can build a life that is. One that amplifies your peaks, supports your valleys, and honors the full complexity of your neurodivergent self. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for allowing yourself to explore your spiky neurocognitive profile with compassion. If this resonated, I invite you to like, share, or comment with your own experience, because the more we name this, the more we normalize it, not just for ourselves, but for the whole community. Until next time, take care of that extraordinary brain of yours. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.